But you should still be, Kit, by what the sea tells me. Come on, time's swimming. What do I do with it? Just put it around you and wrap it tight. Don't be afraid to handle it roughly. It's stronger than it looks. She let go of the sark. It floated in the water, undulating gently in the current. Kit took another breath, submerged, reached down, and drew the sark around him. "Get back, Neat," Cerise said. Nita backfinned several times her own length away from Kit, not wanting to take her eyes off him. He was exhaling, slowly sinking feet first, and with true Rodriguez insouciance he swirled the sark around him like Zorro putting on a new cape. Kit's face grew surprised, though, as the cape continued the motion, swirling itself tighter and tighter around him, binding his arms to his sides. Alarmed, Kit struggled, still sinking, bubbles rising from him as he went down. The struggling did him no good, and it suddenly became hard to see him, as the wizardry in the whale sark came fully alive, and light danced around Kit and the sark. Nita had a last glimpse of Kit's eyes going wide in panic as he and the whale sark became nothing more than a sinking, swirling storm of glitter. "Sri!" Nita said, getting alarmed. With a sound like muffled thunder and a blow like a nearby lightning strike, displaced water hit Nita and bowled her sideways and backward. She fluked madly, trying to regain her balance enough to tell what was going on. The water was full of stirred-up sand, tatters of weed, small confused fish darting in every direction. And a bulk, a massive form that had not been there before. Nita watched the great gray shape rise toward her and understood why Sri had insisted on Kit's change being in deep water. Her own size had surprised her at first. Though a humpback looks small and trim, even the littlest males tend to be 50 feet long. But Kit was twice that, easily. He did not have the torpedo-like grace of a humpback, but what he lacked in streamlining, he made up in sheer mass. The sperm is the kind that most people think of when they hear the word whale, the kind made famous by most whaling movies. Nita realized that all her life she had mostly taken the whale's shape for granted, not considering what it would actually be like up close to one. But here came Kit, stroking slowly and uncertainly at first with that immense tail, and getting surer by the second, looking up at her with the tiny eyes set in the huge domed head, and with his jaw working a bit, exposing the terrible teeth that could crunch a whaling boat in two. Nita felt the size of him, the weight, and somehow the danger, and kept her movements slow and respectful. He was still Kit, but something had been added. He glanced at Sri and Nita, saying nothing, as he rose past them and broke surface to breathe. They followed. He spouted once or twice, apparently to get the feel of it, and then said to Sri in a rather rueful tone of song, "I wish you'd warned me." His voice ranged into a deeper register than a humpback's and had a sharper sound to it, more clicks and buzzes. It was not entirely comfortable on the skin. "I couldn't," Sri said, "or you might have fought it even harder than you did, and the change might have refused to take. That would have been trouble for us. If a whale sark once rejects a person, it'll never work for him at all. After this, it'll be easier for you, which in itself will make some problems. Right now, though, let's get going. Take a long breath. I want to get out of the bay without attracting too much attention." They took breath together and dived deep, Sri in the lead and swimming south by west, Nita and Kit following. The surroundings, thick, lazily waving kelp beds and colonies of bright polyps and anemones, stitched through with the brief silver flash of passing fish, fascinated Nita. But she couldn't give the landscape, or seascape, her whole attention. She had other concerns. "Kit," she tried to say in the speech's silent form for privacy's sake, then found that it wasn't working. She wasn't getting the sort of mental echo that told her she was sending successfully. Probably it had something to do with the shape-change spell. "Hey," she said aloud. "You okay?" The question came out of her as such a long, mournful moan that Kit laughed, a sound more like boiling lava than boiling oatmeal, huge hisses and bubblings mixed together. "Now I am," he said. "Or I will be as soon as I can get used to this bit with the eyes. Yeah, it's weird, but kind of nice, too. Feeling things instead of seeing them. Yeah, even the voices have feelings. Cerise is kind of twitchy. Yeah, you've got sharp edges. You've got fur." "I do not." "Oh, yes, you do. It's soft, your voice. Not like your usual one." Nita was unsure whether to take this as a compliment, so she let it lie. The moment had abruptly turned into one of those times when she had no idea just what to say to Kit. The sort of sudden silence that was acutely painful to Nita, though Kit never seemed to notice it at all. Nita couldn't think of anything to do about the problem, which was the worst part of the whole business. She wasn't about to mention the problem to her mom, and on this subject the Wizard's Manual was hugely unhelpful. The silence was well along toward becoming interminable when Cerise said, "That's the primary way we have for knowing one another down here. We haven't the sort of physical variations you have, differences in head shape and so forth. And even if we did, what good would a distinction be if you had to come right up to someone to make it? By voice we can tell how far away a friend is, how he's feeling, practically what he's thinking. Though the closer a friend is to you, usually, the harder it is to tell what's on his mind with any accuracy." Nita started to sing something, then caught herself back to silence. "Is the change settling in, Kit?" Cerise said. "Now it is. I had a weird feeling, though, like something besides me, my mind, I mean, like something besides that was fighting the change. But it's gone now." "Only for the moment," Cerise said. "See, it's the old rule, no wizardry without its price or its dangers. Though the dangers are different for each of you, since you changed by different methods. As I said, Init, you have to beware pretending too hard, thinking so much like a whale that you don't want to be a human being anymore, or forget how. Wizards have been lost that way before, and there's no breaking the spell from outside. Once you're stuck inside the change shape, no one but you can break out again. If you start finding your own memories difficult to recall, it's time to get out of the whale shape before it becomes you, permanently." "Right," Nita said. She wasn't very worried. Being a humpback was delightful, but she had no desire to spend her life that way. "Your problem's different, though, Kit. Your change is powered more by the spell resident in the whale sark than by anything you're doing yourself. And all the sark's done is confuse your own body into thinking it's a whale's body, for the time being. That confusion can be broken by several different kinds of distraction. The commonest is when your own mind, which is stronger than the whale mind left in the sark, starts to override the instructions the whale sark is giving your body." "Huh?" "Kit," Cerise said very gently, finning upward to avoid the weedy, barnacled wreck of a fishing boat. "Suppose we were, say, several hundred humpback lengths down, in the crushing dark, and suddenly your whale body started trying to behave like a human's body. Human breathing rate, human pulse and thought and movement patterns, human response to pressures and the temperature of the water." Kit said, as the picture sank in. "So you see the problem. Spend too much time in the sark, and the part of your brain responsible for handling your breathing and so forth will begin to overpower the dead brain preserved in the sark. Your warning signs are nearly the opposite of Init's. Language is the first thing to go. If you find yourself losing whale song, you must surface and get out of the sark immediately. Ignore the warning. The best that can happen is that the whale sark will probably be so damaged it can never be used again. The worst thing she didn't say it. The worry in her voice was warning enough. No one said much of anything for a while, as the three of them swam onward, south and west. The silence, uneasy at first, became less so as they went along. Suri, to whom this area was as commonplace as Kit's or Nita's home streets might have been, simply cruised along without any great interest in the surroundings. But Nita found the seascape endlessly fascinating, and suspected Kit did, too. He was looking around him with the kind of fascination he rarely lent anything but old cars and his Z-gauge train set. Nita had rarely thought of what the seascape off the coast of the island would look like. From being at the beach, she had a rather dull and sketchy picture of bare sand with a lot of water on top of it, shells buried in it as they were on the beach, and there had to be weed beds, the seaweed washed up from somewhere. But all the nature movies had given her no idea of the richness of the place. Coral, for example. It didn't come in the bright colors it did in tropical waters, but it was there in great quantity, huge groves and forests of it, the white or beige or yellow branches twisting and writhing together in tight-choked abstract patterns. And shells, yes, but the shells still had creatures inside them. Nita saw Kit start in amazement, then swim down for a closer look at a scallop shell that was hopping over the surface of a brain coral, going about its business. They passed great patches of weed, kinds that Nita didn't know the names of, until they started coming to her as if she'd always known them. Red bladder, kelp, agar, their long dark leaves or flat ribbons rippling as silkily in the offshore current as wheat in a land-born wind. And the fish! Nita hadn't taken much notice of them at first. They'd all looked alike to her, little and silver. But something had changed. They passed by a place where piles had been driven into the seafloor, close together, and great odd-shaped lumps of rusty metal had been dumped among them. Weed and coral had seized on the spot, wrapping the metal and the piles, and the little life that frequented such places, tiny shrimp and krill, swam everywhere. So did thousands of iridescent, silvery indigo fish, ranging from fingerling size to about a foot long, eating the krill and fry as if there were no tomorrow. For some of the smallest of them there wasn't going to be one, Nita realized, as she also realized how hungry she was. "Blues," she said, one sharp, happy note, then dived into the cloud of bluefish and krill and helped herself to lunch. It was a little while before she'd had enough. It took Nita only a couple of minutes to get used to the way a humpback ate, by straining krill and others of the tiniest ocean creatures, including the smallest of the blues, through the sieve-like plates of whalebone or baleen in her jaws. The swift blue shapes that had been darting frantically in all directions were calming down already as Nita soared out of the whirling cloud of them and headed back over to Suri and Kit, feeling slightly abashed and that an explanation of some kind was in order for the sudden interruption of their trip. However, there turned out to be no need for one. Suri had stopped for a snack herself, and Nita realized that Kit had been snacking on fish ever since they left Tiana Beach. A sperm whale was, after all, one of the biggest of the toothed whales, and needed a lot of food to keep that great bulk working. Not that he did anything but swallow the fish whole when he caught them. A sperm's terrible teeth are mostly for defense. Kit paused only long enough to eat 9 or 10 of the biggest blues, then drifted down toward the pilings and the objects stacked sloppily among them. "Neats," he said. "Will you take a look at this? It's cars!" She glided down beside him. Sure enough, the corroded fins of an old model Cadillac were jutting out of a great mound of coral. Under the tangled whiteness of the coral, as if under a blanket of snow, she could make out the buried shapes of hoods or doors, or the wheels and axles of wrecks wedged on their sides and choked with weed. Fish, blues and others, darted in and out of broken car windows and crumpled hoods, while in several places crabs crouched in the shells of broken headlights. "It's a fish haven," Suri said as she glided down beside them. "The land people dump scrap metal on the bottom.